In this video, we are going to be going through the entire listing appointment process, including prep, getting ready, what to say, what not to send, and then everything that needs to happen at the listing appointment so that you look like the pro and get that business. If you've never done a listing appointment before, you've never been on one, or you're getting ready for an upcoming one, you are going to want to watch this entire video so that you get everything you need to know and you'll be able to crush that appointment. I'm Frank Kritzman, best hair on YouTube. Let's get right into it. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is why we're doing this appointment in the first place. What has happened for you to trigger this event so that you can actually set up this appointment? And I want to kind of briefly touch on when this is an actual listing appointment and when it's not an actual listing appointment. Okay, not an actual listing appointment is, for example, a for sale by owner. And you've said something along the lines of, are you interested in working with an agent if they bring you a buyer? Oh, yes, cool. All right, sweet. I'll be over tomorrow. Okay, that is not a listing appointment. A listing appointment is when somebody expresses to you, they say, hey man, I'm thinking about selling my house. The next words out of your mouth need to be something along the lines of, sounds good. Are you available sometime later this week? Maybe we could just run through the process. I can show you how it works and we can go through some numbers, see if it makes sense to work together. Please do not say, can I come over for a listing appointment or something to that effect. Listing appointment, that word, that is a phrase that real estate agents are going to use to each other. If you just ask a potential seller to come over and do a listing appointment, the chances are they're going to be kind of wondering why you're so weird. You want to come over to run through the numbers, to talk through the process, things like that, but you're doing that face-to-face to build that connection and get that sale. And yes, whether you like it or not, going to a listing appointment is like getting a sale. Even though you're not selling any product at that appointment, you are selling yourself. All right, so we've got some kind of appointment scheduled where we're going to meet with a homeowner and run through the numbers. The next thing that we want to do is not send them anything. When I was first getting started and first learning, there was a lot of emphasis placed on sending out a physical pre-listing packet that had everything, all your numbers, all the comps, all that in the mail, actually physically in the mail, and sending that to the homeowner's house before you show up to that appointment. I see this as completely unnecessary. I don't know if maybe this is just kind of a little bit more of an old school thing. I would just completely throw that out the window. You don't need to do that at all. The second thing you do not want to do is send all of your numbers like electronically over email in like a PDF with all your comps and all your commissions and all that. The reason that you do not want to send over your numbers beforehand is because these conversations are best had in person, okay? And without the required context of those numbers, there's a good chance that somebody is going to take it the wrong way, and they're just either going to be completely turned off to you altogether, or they're going to just use your numbers to leverage them to get a better deal with a different agent. I've lost many, many listings this way, so take that from my experience and please do not do that. If somebody hits you with a question like, well, what do you think my house would sell for? Or something to that effect, you do not want to just send them everything over email. What you want to say is, and you definitely don't want to say, oh, I don't know, or just throw a random number out there. What you want to say is, that's a great question, happy to answer it, but I just need to do a little bit more research so I can get a full picture on the market and I'll be able to give you an educated, full answer. How does that sound? Then from there, you would go ahead and set the appointment and start all your prep and do your research and all that. All right, so the next thing is actually prepping for that specific appointment. And because of reschedules and cancels, I don't actually sit down and prep for that appointment until maybe like an hour before I have to leave. My thing is, I'm not going to do up a bunch of workup for a listing appointment. I'm not going to do that workup like a day or two before because they may just reschedule for a month later, or they may cancel, or who knows. So I like to wait until just before that appointment. I give myself an hour, do the workup, and then I'll roll out to the appointment and knock it out. So there's only a couple things that I'm bringing on this appointment. The first thing is a net sheet. Okay, as you can see, there's only 4 things on this net sheet. When I was getting started, I asked a broker at my brokerage, I said, hey, can you give me an example of a net sheet? Because I have no idea what it is. And they literally sent me a 4-tab Excel spreadsheet where each sheet of the Excel spreadsheet had like 50 different items on it. It was a disaster. It was unformatted, and there was all these equations where there didn't need to be equations, and where it needed equations, it didn't have them. I hated it. It was terrible. So I made this. It's literally 4 things. And the net sheet is a net estimate of proceeds. Okay, so you do not need to spend a bunch of time getting an exact figure, but in my opinion, the net sheet is a necessary item because somebody's asking you, hey, how much am I going to sell my house for? What they really want to know is how much are they going to walk away with after they sell their house. So here's the 4 things on my net sheet. We have sales price to estimate. I usually guess this on the low end or the mid range. Then I have my title fees in there, and I will bring a quote from a title company. My title company that I like to use has a website where I can go in and punch the numbers and it'll spit me out a quote. Either find a title company that will do that for you, or you can ask a title company to send you a quote every time. That's very time consuming, so I would find somebody in your area that you can quickly get title quotes. Then I have the commissions, whatever the percentages are going to be, and then I have the mortgage payoff, and then at the bottom, net to the seller. Okay? Sales price, title fees, commission, mortgage payoff. What's ever left over is what they're going to walk away with, and that's really the only number that matters. Next thing I'm bringing my comps, my comparable homes. This is the market data to help them come to the determination on what they want to list their house for. I'm not trying to talk them into anything. I'm showing them the data and helping them arrive to their own conclusion. Then based off of whatever conclusion they arrive to on the sales price, I'm going to tell them what's probably going to happen. The video I made on CMAs goes through everything a little bit more detailed, but we're going to bring 2 actives, 2 pending, and 2 sold. Last thing we're bringing, some kind of notepad or something to take notes on. This is exactly what I bring. It is leather bound and looks very fancy, and I think it was $9 at Walmart. Much professional, and I've had it for like 2 years, and it looks fantastic. That is everything that you need to bring, and I'm going to touch one thing that you do not need to bring, and that is a listing agreement. And there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me on this one particular point, but I do not bring a listing agreement, and I would not recommend bringing a listing agreement. I would definitely not bring a listing agreement if you barely even know how to fill one out. You do not want to be figuring it out in front of the client. If you have no idea how to fill out a listing agreement, this is what you say at the listing appointment if they agree to work with you. You say, hey, all of my documents are electronic. Later tonight, I'm going to prep all the paperwork, send it over to you in an email for you to digitally sign. Sound good? Everybody's going to say yes to that. Nobody really likes the paperwork anymore. Plus, if you bring it printed out, there's a good chance you're going to screw something up, and you're just going to have a ton of time sunk into that trying to figure out how to fix it. I also think that bringing that physical contract is kind of like a little bit of a high pressure tactic, or could be a high pressure thing. If you got something in front of them that you want them to sign right away, me personally, everybody can cancel a listing agreement whenever they want, right? So I'm not going to bring a paper contract and try to convince somebody to sign it. If they want to work with me, sweet, I'll send it over to them and it'll be sitting in their inbox. If they don't want to work with me, if I just force them to sign the listing agreement now on paper, they can always just cancel it tomorrow. So there's no point. They either want to work with me or they don't want to work with me. Right, now we are going to go through all my 10-step listing presentation. Okay, if I was going to an appointment, I would not actually bring this piece of paper that has my 10 steps on it. But if I don't have this in front of me, I will start ranting and I will most definitely forget something. One caveat, this listing presentation framework, think of it more as guidelines than actual rules, right? This is not necessarily a script that you want to memorize. There are some key questions in here that you probably should memorize, but this is just a pathway to help you get from point A to point B and gather all the necessary information along the way. Okay, so the first step is the home walkthrough. You are just going to walk through the home with the homeowner. You're going to take notes as you walk around. You're going to be looking for things that pop out to you that need to be repaired or things that need to be cleaned. When you sit down and say, what do I need to do to get the house ready to get on the market? Well, those ceiling fan blades were pretty nasty. You should really clean those air vents. There's this cracked tile in the thing. You clean the glass in the bathrooms, stuff like that. You're getting your punch list of things that need to be fixed and taken care of so that you can make the house show nice. Once you get through the home walkthrough, which is also kind of like the icebreaker, and you should be asking some personal questions along the way just to kind of fish out some personality. The next thing you want to do is sit down at the kitchen table or the kitchen counter preferably, and you are going to connect. That's the next thing you're doing. You're building rapport. Hopefully during the walkthrough, you've uncovered something that you have in common with the seller, and now you are going to converse with them about that and personalize yourself so that you're not just a nerdy salesperson in an untucked in shirt. The connection phase is very important because you want to be friendly and, like I said, build rapport, but you also want to be respectful of their time, so don't spend too much time here on this step. And a good transition out of the rapport building to actually getting into the meat and potatoes of everything is just say something along the lines of, hey, I don't want to keep you here all day, so let me just run through these numbers real quick and I can get out of your hair. Something like that, just something very low stress, low pressure that moves you into talking about the business. That step 3, that's a bit of an introduction or kind of shedding light on what the entire presentation is going to be. You are literally just going to tell the homeowners, say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, just want to let you know today it's going to be real simple. We're just going to go through 3 different things. First, I'm going to ask you a ton of questions about your situation so I can fully understand what's going on so that I can serve you the best way possible. Then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to run through all the numbers. And then lastly, we'll just decide if it makes sense to work together. Does that sound good? Or is that fair? Something like that. From there, you're going to move into step 4, which is information gathering. Okay, so this is where you're going to dig deep and figure out their situation, and you're going to demonstrate that you care, and you're actually going to demonstrate that you know what's going on by the questions that you're asking. This is where we're determining if there's actually a good fit or not, and we're asking each one of these questions for a specific mental data point so that we can change what we're going to do later. So all of these questions are very, very important. All right, here are the questions that we need to be asking in this step. First, what has you thinking about selling? Why do they even want to sell their house in the first place? You need to know this, right? Where are you going to go to next? So your job is not just to sell their house and get their house sold. If you want to actually maintain that client as a future client and somebody who's going to send you business for a long time, you need to take it upon yourself to actually understand the process of selling their house and make sure that they have a next place to go. Not everybody is super familiar with this process. That's why they are hiring you potentially. So you do not want to sell their house if they don't have a next place to go, because then they'll be homeless. So yeah, you may have got the house sold, but ultimately you failed. So you need to be thinking about beyond the check of getting the house sold. Think about goals. Think about achieving their goal. That's ultimately how you're going to maintain that client. You want to ask them, how soon do you want to be in that next place? How soon do you want to get your house sold? That is going to change how the conversation goes when you guys are talking about the list price. You want to ask them, how will your life change when you get this house sold? Or the reverse of that, is it an option to not sell at all? You might think that that's a scary question to ask because you might talk them out of selling, but trust me, taking a listing on who is not really motivated and doesn't really need to sell will just cost you time and money in the long run. Ask me how I know. You want to ask them if they owe anything on their home if you haven't found that out already, so that you can get them an accurate net estimate of proceeds. You want to ask them if they've sold a home before, so that you can get a gauge on their knowledge of the process, so you don't have to like over explain or under explain anything. If it's a multiple agent situation, you maybe want to ask them, how did you select your previous agent? Ask them what's important to them. What did your previous agent do that you did like or didn't like? You want to find out what they did like, do more of those things, find out what they didn't like, and don't do those things. It's very simple. One of my favorite questions is this one right here. What about the home selling process is stressing you out? Sometimes I even will ask that question like right off the bat in the very beginning, because there may be something that's just very stressful to them that they are thinking about, and you want to like knock out that stressful scenario for them right off the bat, because if you don't, they're just going to be thinking about that for the entire time you're there, and they may not even be paying attention, especially if you're boring. So you want to uncover that stress and that uncertainty very early on in the beginning, and then throughout your appointment, explain to them how you're going to solve that stressful problem. Maybe that they're real stressed about how showings work, and they weren't going to bring it up until the very end. So if you just ask that question early on, and they say, oh yeah, don't know how exactly showings are going to work, take a minute, stop, explain it to them, then boom, move on to the next thing, which is, are you familiar with the costs associated with selling a home? This is where you're going to talk about who pays the commissions and the title fees and all that stuff. You want to ask them, are you planning to interview other agents? You want to ask them, what's your primary concern when choosing an agent? Maybe it's purely just commission. Maybe it's they want an agent that will let them list the house at whatever price they want to list it at. Then you want to ask any other questions that you might find relevant during this time. And then to transition out of this phase, you want to ask a question like, I'd like to go through a market analysis with you so you know exactly what the market is doing. Is that fair, or does that sound good? How does that sound? Something like that. From there, you're going to move into step 5, which is the CMA. All right, step 5, you're going to be going through the entire CMA, which is just the 6 printed out listings that you brought. You're not bringing a whole bunch of charts and graphs, because let's face it, you really don't even know what they mean anyways. You are just bringing the listings to show them the actual data. So we're going to go through the actives first. You're going to lay out those actives, and you're going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's 2 other homes that are just like yours that are for sale. This is going to be your competition when we put your house on the market. Now, ideally, you want to use very close comps for this. If there's another house on the street that is not a comp, you absolutely want to have that one off to the side in case they ask about the house down the street for sale. You need to know what they're talking about. I made that mistake once. Sellers asked about a house that was for sale down the street, had no idea what they were talking about, looked like a huge dummy. That's probably why I didn't get that listing. Like I mentioned earlier, you are not using this data to convince them or to beat them up or anything. You are showing them the data. You're telling them this is going to be our competition. And then you're going to just say, what do you think about that? Have you seen these houses? How do you think these houses compare to your home? You are giving them the information. Let them come to the conclusion on their own. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to talk about the pending listings. You're going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's 2 pending houses that are just like yours, 2 houses that are under contract. This data is going to show us how hot the market is at the moment. The key things you're looking for on those pending listings is you are looking at the price points, and you are looking at the days on market. You're going to take those under contract listings and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, see this house just like yours? Here's where they put the price. It took them 30 days to get an offer. This other house over here, just like yours, here's what they listed it at. Took them 2 days to get an offer. What do you think about that? How do you think these houses compare to your house? How did this make you feel? And lastly, you're going to be going over the sold data. Really, the sold data, you're just showing that to let them know that these are most likely what the appraiser is going to use to value their home. You are not necessarily using the sold data to set the list price. You are using the actives and the pendings to get an idea of your starting list price. And the sold data is just going to basically give you justification and let you guys all know if there's actually data to support that price or not. Once you've gone through the sold data, you've completed the CMA, and now it's time to transition to the next step. You transition by saying something like this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, after looking at the data, what do you think would be a good starting list price for your home? And that is going to take you into step 6, which is the conversation around setting the list price for the home. You do not want to be the one that says, I think your house is going to sell for X, or I think we should list it at this, unless they specifically ask you for that information. You want them to be the first one to put that number out there. Realistically, starting list price doesn't always matter, and there may be some people that disagree with me on that one. The thing is, a lot of times a house is just going to sell what it sells for, and there's not a whole lot that can change that. And the reality of the situation is, if you throw out a number, very likely that another agent can come out there and throw out a higher number that's 15 or 20,000 higher, and they're going to go with that agent, and then in a couple weeks they'll just drop the price back down to what you said. They'll get the client, they'll get the sale, and you won't. That is why you are putting the list price in their hands, not yours. All right, grab a pen because you're going to want to write this next part down. If they do ask you, they say, this is a very likely scenario, they say, well, how much do you think we should list the home for? So you want to say this, based on the market, it looks like the home will sell in a range of X to X. And you give them what you think it might sell on the low end and what you might think it sell for on the high end. When we list the home, depending on the activity we get, we will know how we're positioned in the market. Can I explain? Now, this is where you might want to know the average days on market for your area, because that is a particularly helpful data point. But you'd say something, then you would say, if we reach X, which would be the average days on market for the area, and we have not received any offers yet, we'll know that we listed the price a little bit too high. Then you want to tell them it's very important to keep that days on market low, because what's the first thing you think when you see a house that's been sitting on the market for 60 days or more? You think, what's wrong with that house? And we don't want people asking that question, what's wrong with your house? So then you want to ask them, if we get past that average days on market, are you okay lowering the price so that we can keep the days on market low and get your home sold? A lower initial list price is not only our best shot at attracting multiple offers, having multiple offers allows us to not only negotiate the best offer for the deal, but it gives us the leverage in case the buyers are going to ask for something later on in the transaction. If you're only dealing with one offer, then you have nothing to fall back on in case something goes sour. Really, there's just a few highlights that you're trying to hit here. You're trying to get them to list as low to the fair market value as possible. You want to prep them in the conversation for the possibility of a price drop later in case it's necessary. You want to give them the opportunity and make the list price their decision, not yours. Then you also want to have the conversation about how the activity is going to show us if we've priced too high or not. For example, you want to say something like, if we have received no showings at all, we're probably 10-15% too high on the list price. Or if we receive some showings but no offers, we're probably around 10 to 5% off on price. We are putting all of the power in their hands and then telling them how to find out if we're priced correctly or not. Once you agree on a sales price, the next thing you're going to be doing is going to step 7, which is going through the net sheet. You want to make sure that the sellers are fully aware of all the costs involved in selling their home, and they're aware of a pretty solid number that they're going to walk away with should their house sell for X. Reason being, there's a lot of people who skip this step, and I know because I've sold a lot of homes where the feedback I received from those sellers is that their previous agent did not tell them what the numbers were going to be. They just had no idea, and they just kind of didn't know what to expect and just walked away with a check at the end and didn't know even what they were being charged, which is why I was selling their house that second time and not that other agent. All right, so now this is the doozy. We're about to get ready for that commission talk, and we're going to have that conversation. So when you break out that net sheet, what I would do is actually There's 4 things on there: sales price, title fees, commission, mortgage payoff. I would actually start with the net proceeds walking away. The conversation would go something like this: Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if we sell your house for X amount and you walk away with, this example I have from a previous appointment, if you walk away with $90,000, is that something you could live with? And they might just say yes. And then you could go down the breakdown. Cool. That is the breakdown of, it has this amount for the title fees, this amount for the sales price. It has this amount for the commission, and that takes care of the listing agent and the buyer's agent. And then that also has your mortgage payoff on there, and you walking away with that $90,000. If they agree up front that they like the amount that they're going to walk away with, then you don't really need to have any sort of fight on the commission amount. I think the big problem that a lot of people, the reason that they're running into this, can you lower your commission objection, is because they are leading out with that instead of leading out with what they are going to get. And then just talk about how that commission works into get to that final net number. I remember when I was first starting out and I was getting going, I practiced so many different objection handlers to the will you lower your commission objection. And then I actually never ran into that scenario. There's been maybe like 2 or 3 times potentially that's come up, and I've actually had it more times where I'm offering to give people a discount and they talk my commission up. That's happened more times than people asking me to lower my commission. But should that will you lower your commission objection come up, this is how I have and would handle it again. They would say something like, that's pretty high. Is there any way you can go any lower? I would say something like this: Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what commission percentage would it take for you to agree to hire me today? You kind of change the conversation from your commission is too high to what number is it going to take to make it happen and we can make a deal today? Like, let's do this. Me personally, I have no problem dropping 1% or even 2% to get a deal, because I know I'm going to do a great job and I'm going to have that client for a lifetime. And the value of acquiring a new client outside of your sphere of influence is huge. It's worth much more than that initial check. So now at this point, we have agreed on a sales price. We have gathered all the information. We have agreed on the final net number that the seller is going to walk away with. And if you think about it, now they're already 80% invested in you and invested in the process and believe in what you're going to do. Next step after the net sheet, step 8, is you are just going to literally talk through the selling process with them and let them know how the whole process is going to go. You're going to talk about the prep phase. We need to get the house ready for pictures, right? And then pictures are going to come by. I'm going to have my photographer come through and it's going to be beautiful. We're going to get these wonderful pictures. Then we're going to get your house listed on the MLS. When you give me the go-ahead, I'm going to switch the listing over to active, and we'll be ready to start showings. Walk them through the showing process, let them know, hey, I'm going to have a lockbox on the property, and we're going to put you in a group chat, and we're going to request the time with you to see if it's okay to have an agent come by and do a showing. And then once that showing happens, I'm going to be reaching out to the agent to try to get that feedback from them so that we can be even better for the next person. For this step, I also have a little checklist, like a cleaning checklist to drop off with the seller, and it just gives them a brain jogger of everything to make sure they have cleaned, like the front walk, replacing the doormat, cleaning the ceiling fan blades, the air vents, things like that, things that are going to pop out and turn somebody off to the property. So I might give them that checklist so that they know. But if it's a very, very clean house, if the house is already in pristine, ready to go condition, which does happen sometimes, you don't even need that part. You want to discuss the offer process with them and let them know how offers are going to come in, as if they haven't sold a house before. Just kind of talk through what's going to go on, the potential things that buyers might be asking for, repair budgets, talk them through the inspection process, the appraisal process, about how closing might take about 30 days. And you want to discuss with them the different challenges that might arise during each one of those phases. Maybe they want to make a request for repairs on the inspection phase, or maybe the appraiser is going to come by and hold up the appraisal for a certain repair. You just want to prep them for all these different possibilities and just shed some light on the entire scenario. This also might be a good time to talk about what would happen if the appraisal comes in low. If that's something that happens a lot in your area, it's not really as much of a thing now. It used to be a huge thing a couple of years ago. Every single appointment I was talking about almost not even what happens if the appraisal low. It was basically we're having the conversation of here's what we're going to do when the appraisal comes back low. Not as much of an issue now, but you still might want to have that conversation. Then moving into step 9, you're just going to ask them if they have any questions. Do you have any questions, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, about my process? Was there anything I missed? Was there anything that you have a problem with? Is there anything stopping you from moving forward? Is there anything that made you feel uncomfortable hiring me as your agent? You want to use this step to pull out any last minute objections that they might have or any last minute holdups. Then step 10 is just the closing. You want to not be high pressure, but you just want to be intentional and deliberate about your closing. You don't want it to be a hidden secret thing. Just be very intentional. Now that we've been through all of this process and all this information, do you feel comfortable hiring me as your real estate agent? Would you like to move forward with me getting your home sold? Are you against moving forward with me as your agent? Are you ready to get this process started and be one step closer to moving to Tampa or wherever? There's so many different ways to ask it. You can, ask for it in a no question, ask for it in a yes question. Just find some way to do it that, again, is deliberate and intentional, but just comes off as natural, how you normally talk. You just want it to, you don't want it to sound scripted. You just want it to sound like you're being yourself, talking to one friend, talking to another. If they agree to hire you, this is when you would just say, all right, sounds great, Miss Seller. I'm going to get all the paperwork done for you tonight, and I'm just going to send it over to your email so that you can electronically sign it and fill it out. Looking forward to working with you. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your day. Whatever, boom, then you're done. Now, if you do manage to win that listing appointment, this is a huge step, but try not to get too excited because there's still a ton of work that needs to be done. And if you're just a little bit confused as to what's going to happen next, make sure you watch this video or there, I don't know where it's going to be. Make sure you watch this video about what to do after you get that listing agreement signed.